when a soldier assigned to keep wild animals at bay came across a drowning jaguar, he made a bold decision to disobey his orders and save its life. He never expected to be repaid for his kindness, but what followed was beyond anything he could have imagined. One scorching day, as Ethan patrolled the edge of a vast river soon to be dammed, a strange noise pierced the heavy air, a deep, haunting growl that sent chills down his spine. Instinctively alert, Ethan crept through the thick underbrush, drawn to the sound. At the river's edge, he saw something that took his breath away. A jaguar, one of the jungle's most feared predators, trapped in the river's brutal current. Judging by its desperate movements, Ethan realized it was drowning. Though his job was to keep both protesters and wild animals away from private land under development, every part of him ached for the suffering creature. His orders were clear: shoot on sight, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to do something, anything, to help. His heart battled against duty, mirroring the chaos tearing through the Amazon itself. Greedy corporations were slicing into nature's sanctuary, sparking protests as environmentalists and indigenous communities fought to protect what was sacred. Ethan had become a reluctant enforcer in this battle. Once a soldier, he now worked for a private security firm tasked with keeping opposition at bay. He knew the Amazon's importance, but he also had a family to support. So, with a heavy heart, he kept patrolling, always torn between his job and his beliefs. But right now, none of that mattered. He couldn't walk away from this helpless animal. Pushing aside doubts and danger, Ethan pulled a rope from his belt and secured it to a sturdy tree a few feet from the riverbank. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the churning water, heart racing. The jaguar could kill him in seconds, but letting it drown felt worse. Stroke by stroke, he swam closer to the flailing big cat, which thrashed and growled in fear. Ethan had no idea how he would manage to help, but he had to try. As he got nearer, he saw the fear in the jaguar's eyes, and he understood it. The animal was trapped, terrified, and now faced a human, another threat in its world. Yet in truth, Ethan was the one at greater risk. Carefully, he reached out his arm, offering help instead of harm. The jaguar's jaws snapped shut just inches from him, but it didn't bite. Instead, it let out a low, sorrowful growl, as if it knew he meant well. Summoning all his strength, Ethan gripped the cat's scruff and began to swim toward the shore, holding tight to the rope that kept him from being swept away. The struggle was intense. The jaguar's powerful muscles fought against him as the river's relentless current threatened to drag them both under. Ethan pulled the animal with everything he had, locked in a desperate struggle against nature. Man and beast, battling side by side, each moment feeling like forever. At last, using every last bit of his strength, Ethan hauled the jaguar onto solid ground. The big cat collapsed beside him, gasping for breath, its body shaking with exhaustion. Ethan forced himself to his feet as fast as he could. The last thing he wanted was to give the jaguar a chance to attack now that they were on dry land. But the animal didn't react with aggression. Instead, it looked at Ethan, not with hatred, but with tired curiosity. It panted heavily and tried to pull itself up the riverbank, but barely had the energy to lift its head, let alone its body. Ethan knew the fight wasn't over yet. Though it had escaped the river, the jaguar remained a wild and unpredictable creature. Ethan took a cautious step back, giving the cat space, and scanned its body for injuries. From what he could tell, it had cuts and scrapes, but nothing too severe. If those wounds were going to heal well, they needed treatment. But how would the jaguar react now? Just because it had let him pull it from the water didn't mean it would welcome another close approach. Still, Ethan's heart told him to try. He reached slowly into his backpack and took out his first aid kit. It was a risk, but he couldn't leave the jaguar to suffer. As the animal watched him closely, Ethan unrolled some gauze and soaked it in disinfectant. Then, moving as calmly as he could, he walked back toward the big cat. To his surprise, it didn't growl or back away. It didn't attack either. Ethan let out a quiet breath he hadn't realized he was holding and gently began to bandage the wounds. The jaguar let out a low growl when the disinfectant stung, but it didn't lash out. It was almost as if the animal understood that this pain meant healing, and that the man meant no harm. As Ethan cleaned and wrapped the injuries, he spoke to the animal in a soft, steady voice. Some of the gashes were deep and looked like they'd been there a while. He couldn't help but wonder if the big cat had gotten caught in the barbed wire fencing set up around the private property. There had been talk of a large predator slipping through the barriers. Maybe this was the culprit. The thought made him chuckle quietly, imagining the jaguar as a feline burglar. But he quickly went quiet again. This cat could still turn on him, and he knew it, but something in its gaze told Ethan that it understood. He was trying to help. The jaguar's snarls faded into quiet acceptance, and the tense atmosphere softened. Once the animal was patched up, Ethan hesitated. He knew he should walk away and get back to work, but something in him resisted. Deep down, he understood the risks. Helping this animal could cost him his job. In the eyes of his employers, the jaguar was an enemy. But this was the first time in weeks that Ethan truly felt at peace. So he made up his mind to return to the same spot the next day, hoping the jaguar might be there. He couldn't hide the excitement bubbling inside him when, the following afternoon, he found the big cat waiting at the riverbank. Ethan had brought a chunk of raw meat and watched with awe as the jaguar devoured it in seconds. What began as cautious visits became a routine. Days turned into weeks. Ethan continued to feed and care for the animal, offering shelter and support. Slowly, a fragile trust formed between them. He gave the jaguar a name, Cazador, the Spanish word for hunter, and the animal seemed to recognize that this human was different. As their unlikely bond grew, Ethan began to question his loyalties. He was working for a corporation set on draining the Amazon for profit, but his time with Cazador sparked something deeper, a sense of duty to protect the forest and its creatures. He knew the job paid the bills and kept his family fed, but he started wondering what the true cost was. He wanted his children to grow up surrounded by nature, to value wildlife, not fear or destroy it. How could he teach them that if he was helping tear it all down? He knew he had to find balance. For now, he continued doing his job. Only now, he had a companion. Cazador followed him wherever he went, ensuring that he had protection from other predators. He wanted to protect his kind human, just like Ethan had protected him. One day, as they moved through the jungle side by side, Cazador uncovered something that changed everything. Hidden deep within the rainforest, buried beneath thick layers of leaves and vines, was an ancient burial site, sacred ground belonging to the indigenous people who had lived in harmony with this land for generations. Cazador had been walking peacefully next to Ethan when he suddenly stopped and started sniffing around. That's when he found it, an old hidden grave site. Ethan's thoughts began to spiral. What began as concern for animals like Cazador had now grown into something much deeper. This discovery brought up ethical questions that were impossible to ignore. Ethan realized this was a turning point. The land he'd been hired to defend wasn't just rich in natural beauty. It held irreplaceable cultural history. The idea that sacred idols and burial sites could be destroyed to make way for a factory felt completely wrong. He couldn't continue to let this land be violated. So that day, Ethan made a life-altering decision. He would change sides and stand up for what was right. Using everything he knew about the terrain, he secretly reached out to environmental groups and indigenous leaders, sharing the location of the sacred site. Together, they filed a legal case to protect the land from destruction. Though there had been many lawsuits before, this was the first one backed by heritage claims. And it was all thanks to Cazador's discovery. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the Jaguar had come into his life for this exact reason. Word of Ethan's transformation from a corporate enforcer to a defender of the Amazon spread rapidly. His story captured hearts everywhere, a tale of redemption, of a man who had chosen to side with nature instead of against it. Of course, not everyone welcomed his change of heart. Many of Ethan's former co-workers turned on him. Some even sent threats. They resented him, assuming he believed himself superior for joining the opposition. But that wasn't true at all. Ethan didn't want to prove anyone wrong. He just wanted to help save a rainforest being destroyed for profit. Naturally, the corporation didn't take it lightly either. Now that activists had a stronger case, the protests grew louder and sometimes more aggressive. Ethan tried to avoid the demonstrations, knowing it gave his old team the perfect chance to confront him. Still, as he continued to support the activists, he found himself in more and more dangerous situations. The company he once worked for was determined to hold on to its control over the rainforest, and they weren't afraid to use force. During one especially intense protest, tensions between demonstrators and the security forces exploded. Ethan was caught in the middle, trying desperately to calm things down. But when violence broke out, he had to act fast. In the chaos, he made a split-second decision and stood between the protesters and the guards, shielding them from harm. That moment was a turning point in his personal journey, a clear sign of where his loyalties now lay. His courage and determination became a symbol for others. Those who had once seen him as an enemy began to see him as an ally. He had gone from a hired gun to a defender of the Amazon, and in doing so became a symbol of hope and transformation. The battle to protect the rainforest only grew fiercer. Protests, court cases, and global awareness piled pressure on the corporation. Through it all, Ethan and Cazador continued their quiet patrols, watching over the land and the lives within it. The image of the man and the Jaguar quickly became a powerful symbol for the movement to protect the region's sacred and natural lands. Ethan's story became a rallying point. Having lived on both sides of the struggle, his transformation inspired many to reflect on their own beliefs and actions. Together, they became a force that couldn't be ignored. His actions sparked a movement that kept growing, impossible to silence. Once international media picked up the story of Ethan and Cazador, the attention surged. Ethan was flooded with interview requests from major magazines and global news outlets who wanted to share his journey of redemption. Naturally, he said yes. He believed that any press that helped the cause was worth it. One interview led to another, and then another, until eventually he was invited onto a popular talk show. It was his chance to shine a spotlight on the important work they were doing to save the very jungle he had once been ordered to patrol. What had started as a local protest suddenly had global interest. People who had never heard of the Amazon struggles were now donating from around the world. In fact, so much support poured in that the team could barely keep up with the funds. Ethan soon realized the real key to stopping greedy developers was pressure, public pressure. When people care, companies pay attention. If a business thinks its customers might walk away, they start rethinking their actions. Ethan knew this from personal experience. He had a long list of grievances against his former employer. They had made him do things that never sat right with his conscience, and he knew many others had been forced into similar situations. People desperate for income often took whatever job they could get, even ones that clashed with their values. Once Ethan understood that, he knew exactly what to do. He began using the money earned from interviews with Cazador to support people in his community. Some of them former co-workers, others employed by different security companies. By giving them financial support, he gave them options. Some were finally able to leave jobs they hated, jobs that made them feel complicit in harming the land. Now they could seek work that aligned with what they truly believed in. It was a game-changing idea. The shift in support changed the narrative completely. Former critics and co-workers began to join him instead of fighting him, and together they achieved the impossible. His former employer pulled out of the development project. The land where Cazador and the ancient burial site had been discovered would remain untouched. It was a groundbreaking moment, especially considering how powerful those corporations usually were. For the first time, Ethan felt proud. He could go home to his children knowing he was doing everything he could to create a future where animals roamed freely and safely in their natural homes. And best of all, he knew Cazador would no longer risk being caught in barbed wire or stumbling into man-made traps. The land was safe again. The story of Ethan and Cazador became legend. It traveled far beyond the jungle and became a symbol of transformation, of second chances, and of the impact one person could have by choosing the right path. Thanks to the success in stopping his old employer, Ethan now had the confidence and reach to support other environmental causes. He used his growing platform and Cazador's fame to keep raising awareness and fighting for land protection across the region. He and the incredible Jaguar kept at it for years, using their bond to shine a light on important causes. But one morning, Ethan awoke to find Cazador gone. It broke his heart, but he understood. Cazador had always been wild, and perhaps now he finally felt his home was safe enough to return to for good. Every so often, Ethan would catch a glimpse of him in the distance during a forest walk, and those brief moments gave him the strength to carry on. He had no doubt that Cazador's future family, and his own, deserved a world where nature could thrive. He would never stop fighting for that. What a beautiful story! Would you have tried to save the Jaguar, even with all the risks? What are your thoughts on deforestation? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.